तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया, वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है, में मौजूद है। फूल खिलते हैं बड़ बड़ के सन, बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम।
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل؟
Have you not considered, O Muhammad, how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant?
ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل؟
Did he not make their plan into misguidance?
وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل.
And he sent against them birds in flocks,
ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل.
striking them with stones of hard clay.
فجعلهم كعصف مأكول.
And he made them like eaten straw.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Radio Ramadan se program Reflections. I'm your host Zubair Akram and my guest Sheikh Ridwan Muhammad. You just listened to or seen the recitation of Surah Fil. We have been reflecting on Surah Fil, 5 ayahs only, and I think we've done about 15 episodes on these 3 to 4 ayahs so far. The translation of what was presented to you in Urdu is, तुमने देखा नहीं कि तुम्हारे रब ने हाथी वालों के साथ क्या किया, क्या उसने उनकी तदबीर को अकारत नहीं कर दिया और उन पर परिंदों के झुंड भेज दिए जो उन पर पक्की हुई मिट्टी के पत्थर फेंक रहे थे, फिर उनका ये हाल कर दिया जैसे जानवरों का खाया हुआ भुस. So inshallah today I'm going to ask Sheikh Rizwan to let's very briefly summarize again of Surah Fil, fast pace, fast forward up to a point where we will reflect on the last verse in depth inshallah. Assalamu alaikum Sheikh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, this has been in a way quite a topical surah. What's happening in Iran, Middle East, what's happening in the world just now. I have been watching some of the clips and a lot of people are quoting the surah. And right at the start, we said maybe that's not the only prism we look into the surah. This is not the only way we look at the surah. There is a deeper meaning to it. There is another way of looking at Quran, and there is another way of looking at this surah as well. Especially in Pakistan, I've been watching some of the news and some of the scholars, both Shia tradition and Sunni tradition, and they've been quoting the surah. And they're waiting for these ababil to arrive somehow and Abraha to be kind of dealt with, or sari tadbirein akarat chali jaye, like all of that. So just that backdrop and the difference the way we approach this surah, if we can maybe summarize a little bit how the approach should be different.
Oh, it's different. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, oh my goodness, you put me on the spot there. So, yeah, people are quoting it. I mean, that's a deep thing you need to go into. Then, if you want to,
inshallah,
look at the relevance of the verses to that, or the incident to that. If you followed what I've been reflecting on the chapter, I think when we started, we were thinking it was quite a strange chapter to discuss, because I think the relevance, I think it missed you. You're probably thinking, what's the relevance of Surah Fil and Quraysh? What's going to happen? So yeah, I've noticed that as well. A lot of people, a lot of videos going around with Surah Fil in them as well, and the expectation being exactly what you've said. I think what it does miss is something monumental in the Quranic narrative. That if you understood it, you wouldn't. You would. I wouldn't. I don't think you would make that assumption or jump or expectation. And so, I think this indicates a deep state of defeatism in the ummah generally, that you have to almost clutch at straws, as we say in English. And it's relevant to last verse of this chapter. فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ, and we made them into beaten up straws, beaten up staffs of straw, of wheat. So I think people clutch at straws at times when there's trauma, when there's extreme odds against the ummah, and those odds have been stacking up for a long period of time. If you look at the Mughal dynasty, it fell at the hand of the East India Company. The Mongols attacked Baghdad. There was the Crusaders sacking Constantinople, then going all the way to Jerusalem and filling it with blood and death and destruction. And you've got then the First World War, the Second World War. All those instances where in dire situations, the unraveling of the Khilafah, just the 102nd anniversary of that fall just passed a couple of days ago. And actually, my son's memorizing the Turkish anthem, which talks about the martyrs who gave their lives for the land, this land, Istanbul, Turkey, against the Greeks and the Australians, New Zealanders, and the British. So that's all times when you expect the Ababil to come. But I think it misses a very, very deep Quranic narrative, which I'm surprised people either there's a myopia, which is like kind of a spiritual or intellectual blindness, or there's a refusal to engage with the real issues, which are very difficult to engage with, which are deep and require a lot of work. So I think it's a very late, with all due respect to the people that are quoting it, I think it's very disrespectful to the Quran to make use of it without putting in the effort. We talked about this a couple of episodes ago. اعقل فتوكل. Tie your camel and then have reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a basic premise. And let me just tie this all in. I'm trying to think how to go about this, but the intervention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this instance, which is Al-Fil, is, I believe, the end of the outward manifestations of miracles to support a prophet. So if you look at history, you look at the Prophet Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically supported him in his da'wah by bringing the tufan. The tufan was this flood. The time of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, you had intervention by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he was up against Nimrod, you had Fir'aun, you had the same thing. You had the Prophet Hud, Shu'aib, all these prophets. There was interventions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that came to the aid of them at the point of weakness and the point of survival being required. That came from the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam just before his birth. So Al-Fil is the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets the groundwork and the environment within which the Prophet will be born, will be brought up in relative safety, and he will be able to live a complete normal life, free and under the guise of and under the shade of the Kaaba, be given to people who will take care of him in the desert, and this will all take place. That intervention, which is this, marks the end of that. And in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there's never that the natural forces of being subverted and changed to grant the Prophet ﷺ victory. It all came from the effort, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enriched them with iman and with, with even angelic help, but never something that was external that came and you could see this is supernatural or this is beyond the laws of nature. So even the Battle of Badr, for example, the companions saw angels in the form of men fighting on the battlefield, but that was not against nature. That was, for all intended purposes, the Quraysh just saw warriors on the battlefield. In the Battle of Khandaq, for example, the war tipped by natural forces, just natural cold wind, and the inability of the Ahzab to remain besieging the city of the Prophet ﷺ. Everything was left to this effort and tawakkul. This is pure tawakkul. This is pure effort and tawakkul. And if you don't understand that, then you will expect this miraculous intervention without us changing our situation. And this goes back to...
But Sheikh, sorry, there is this issue here, right? The issue is that the reading of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, the way the communities, Muslims grew up, listening to the scholars, and it is always an asymmetric war. It's never of the equals. Be it Badr, be it Uhud, Hunain, all of these, Muslims were always outnumbered. And yet, the readings say they got victory because of intervention. It wasn't because they had superiority of technology, superiority of numbers, or skill. It was never that.
Yeah, so what was it? So what I'm saying is, and this is clear, a supernatural intervention such as, the earth, erupting underneath them, or God sending a scourge from the sky, or some kind of plague coming and afflicting them. That wasn't how victory took place. It came from the abnormal aspects of it were angelic. So in the Battle of Badr, we know that for a fact. But in the other battles, we don't. In the other battles, essentially, it is that faith and serenity that comes with tawakkul, and with preparing as much as you can. It's like the Quran says, prepare for them whatever mastata'tum, whatever you're able to. Min ribat al-khayl, from the armory and the cavalry. That is the preparation, and then this deep sense of purpose and this deep sense of destiny that you have in your hands. That against people that have no sense of destiny, no sense of higher purpose, is very powerful. If you look at even non-Muslim warfare and battles in human history, that has always been at the core. That sense of principle, purpose, and intention that is very deep has always vanquished large armies. And so in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, the only instance that you get of that is essentially the Battle of Badr, where the companions narrate that they saw warriors that didn't recognize them. When they mentioned this to the Prophet ﷺ, they said this: Allah sent angels in the form of humans. But that wasn't it wasn't like a supernatural breaking of the laws of nature. It was something that you could interpret it as just being this kind of urge and this valor and this surety manifesting itself in something that the Prophet then described as being angels. But never, I've never seen this being the case, that you have supernatural interventions in the form of the pre-prophetic, the pre-Prophet ﷺ period. In other words, what I'm saying is, there's a watershed at the battle, this instance of Fil, the army of the elephant, is a watershed in prophetic history generally, because there's no intervention after that. There's no supernatural, plague-like, from the heavens intervention from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's a reason for that. And I think, unless I give you the reason you won't understand or you won't accept, is that the Prophet ﷺ's message was premised on the power of his message, his teaching, and his revelation that he was given. The miracle was the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ's miracles were himself and his the Prophet ﷺ, his own being, his own character, and the miracles that took place at his hands, which were essentially even another amazing issue is that they all were almost all focused in on his companions, never for other people that didn't believe. So if you think of all the apart from the instance of the splitting of the moon, all instances relate to the Prophet doing things for the companions at times of need, for people who already believed in him, sallallahu. So that's the breaking of nature for the Prophet's own companions, never to vanquish or to defeat or to humiliate an enemy. And so at that point, I think we need to think, why is that the case? And I think it's to do with the fact that the message is so powerful, it doesn't require intervention, but also that will be cut off until the end of time as well. And so this is
why Badr an exception?
Badr is an exception because the Prophet said it was an exception. He interpreted the people who are on the battlefield, the companions never recognize as being angels and angelic. But if you were a companion fighting with the Prophet in Hunain, in Uhud, in Khandaq, in Battle of Mu'ta, you would have not seen anything that would indicate to you that there's some kind of intervention happening. Like the Battle of Mu'ta, you have Ja'far al-Tayyar, you have Zayd bin Haritha radiallahu anhu, you have Abdullah bin Rawaha being killed, and the Byzantine Empire is picking off Muslims left, right, and center. And it's at that point that not that this wind comes or God sends brimstone or plague. It's Khalid bin Walid takes the banner, and he makes a maneuver which changes the battle. He designs and leads the army to a victory. It's the same thing with Uhud as well. The Prophet changes the narrative in Uhud, re-congregates everybody, and then sends a garrison out to attack the Quraysh once they feel that they're victorious. It's all to do with warfare and the planning of warfare. In Badr, it was essentially the secret of it is the Prophet's prayer at night, when he said that if oh Allah, if you do not allow this army to be victorious, then there'll be nobody on the face of this earth that says La ilaha illallah. So there was this very deep spiritual connection of the battle to the Prophet himself. After that, it's a watershed. You don't see that at all. So essentially, my point is the referencing of this and expectation of this is a dereliction of duty from the Ummah in terms of providing and preparing themselves for what they need to do to be able to act in a way that saves and helps and defends people. I think it is defeatism at its best if you quote Quran without providing the backup proof from your actions and your preparation.
So the question then is the purpose of the surah. It is for our earlier on we discussed like earlier episodes. So there is khitab to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so speeches to him alayhi salatu wasalam, and actually to Quraysh, and then there is also to us. We need to understand for what it means to us.
Yeah, so this is it. So given all that, there's two layers to this. The two layers are that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you to think about what God did to the companions of the war elephant. And then Allah says, did we not turn their there's two use of kaid ja'ala actually here. Ja'ala means to turn, to make, to transform. Alam yaj'al, did God not transform their plot into an unraveling? In other words, God, it's almost like magic. When you do something, you change it. So that is the first ja'al in this chapter. Actually, the first transformation is
psychological.
Perfect. You got it, because that's what God wants you to focus on. And then Allah says, and we sent upon them, Tayran Ababil, these flying birds in droves. And what do they do? تَرْمِيهِمْ بِحِجَارَةٍ مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. They pelt them with these clay-like stones. And then it says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ. So remember I said two ja'als. The first ja'al, the first transformation and changes, their plot is changed into unraveling. It just unravels mentally, psychologically, when they know that God is going to protect it. And we talked about this, the elephant not moving, and Abu Abdul Muttalib, insisting that he doesn't have a worry about the Kaaba.
So
That's
the first
unraveling.
jala lakum happened because of two things, Mahmud and Abdul Muttalib.
Yeah, so the elephant, and then so this is once they saw that, or Abraha saw that, it was over. I mean, that's the mental illness is going to start in his head. That whispering is going to turn into a voice that's going to say, "You're dead. You and your army are going to be decimated." He's just waiting, and the next two verses tell you that. And then Allah says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. The end is that God takes this army of 60,000 or so with a war elephant, with Abraha, who's like this major player on the world stage, because before this he had almost like a world conference in Sid Ma'rab, in the what's the barrier, the aqueduct. So he's basically that. What happens is that he is made into and transformed into, from that power and strength, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. Then God makes them into these chewed up pieces of straw. So the first change is internal, and the second is external. So we can't see in Abraha's head when he knew that he was a goner, and we say in Glasgow, as a goner, meaning he's all gone. He's a dead man walking. We can't see that unless you look deep into his eyes, and you were right next to him, and you asked him. He probably wouldn't even let any inclination out that was the case, until you see the end. فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَأَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ. And then Allah transforms that power into something you cannot deny, which is this chewed up straw. Okay, so that's the internal and external destruction. There's two layers here. And for us, if you're saying what is it for us, I would say that it tells you something that I just talked about now, which is, if you want to change the outward, like if you want to like change the situation that's happening in the world, okay, the external, you want to do ja'al, let's just say use the Quranic, let's mirror what the Quran is saying. If you want to, in أردت أن تجعل الحزن الذي تراه في الخارج حزنا في الباطن, I'm going to say it in Arabic, فعليك بهذه الأشياء. If you want to change the ugliness,
इसका तर्जुमा करूं.
No. If you want to change the ugliness that you see externally, you need to start to transform something internally. And where's that? The ja'al, I use ja'al just because I had to say in Arabic then. If you want to turn that external ugliness that you see in the world into beauty, you have to change something internal. And that's the Quran. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. We heard this verse.
Yeah, ما بأنفسهم.
What does it say?
खुदा ने किसी कौम की हालत नहीं बदली जब तक कि वो खुद अपनी हालत ना बदले. Yes,
so the qawm, the hal, you said qawm ki halat, meaning the external state of a community. God does not change the state of a community or a people. State meaning destruction, defeat, humiliation, and poverty, and degradation. That's external. God does not change it until what? حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم, until they make the internal psychological change. So changing themselves internally, what does that mean? If I was to say, okay, Zubair, what does that? What's the top three things they need to change internally? Where would you go? Would you go into the mind? Would you go into the heart? Would you go into, what would you go into planning? That you kind of internally you plan, and then you attempt to do something. The point is, this chapter tells us how God changed the power, external power, by basically short-circuiting the internal power. Basically like cutting the switch to that mindset of victory and power. Once that was cut in Abraha, when he knew he was a goner, as we say, he knew he was going to be defeated because there's something else working against him, the external unravels easily. So you have any empire on the face of this earth that is haughty and arrogant and senses itself to be beyond international protocol, and there's probably one or two I can think of off the top of my head that are of that state. They will remain like that until you just eat it. Something eats away internally at them. And at that point,
But,
they're walking dead.
but even eating away, the psychological effect can only be possible that there is in the background
Mhm.
some kind of power that exists.
Yes, yes. So they have
Otherwise,
to
it won't work.
they have to come to a realization that there is something that can take away that power, that energy, that
Yeah.
privilege that they have of marauding the earth. So I was reading today a certain country in attacking another country, and it was basically at will, at whatever time, sending sorties, attacking, bombing, killing, maiming, slaughtering, without any accountability and without any pushback. And so that seems like complete privilege, like an open check, an open check where you can sign and do whatever you want. And that is something that is it's internal to the Quranic narrative. There is always going to be people on the earth that you see as being united and strong, but internally there's a deep tortured going on, a deep tortured soul in there. And it's a question of when that unravels. Like every human civilization, I said before, I think a couple of episodes ago, Ibn Khaldun says that there's like 3 generational cycles of rise and fall, of that real fervor and impetus and energy that comes initially. And you can think in immigrant populations. I think of any immigrant population arriving in a country, has to learn the language and sometimes doesn't, has to put a head of, a roof over its head, has to provide food for its family. It really does do amazing things. It moves mountains essentially. And then the next generation is much better set, it's much more affluent. And then that energy, that desire, that fervor disappears. And then the last generation, meaning like that cycle will essentially, lose it all because there's no plan, there's no purpose. And so that is always what happens with people that have this initial energy. Like America, for example, had this initial energy of being the world's policeman from the 70s onward, mid 70s onwards. And then all of a sudden, internally, you can see the society crackling or dismembering itself. It requires new populations, new immigrants to come and give it fresh blood, fresh ideas. And the unfortunate thing for me is that the Muslim populations in the Muslim world provides a lot of that energy, a lot of that fervor, a lot of the human resources that keep that system going. But otherwise, it would not survive. It would not survive at all. So they're paid, employees making good wages, but still employees servicing, essentially a country which is bankrolled over 50 external conflicts. So we are complicit in this as well. I mean, Muslim scientists, Muslim, professionals are complicit in buttressing up those systems. So we have to change our perspective, change our narrative in some way. But as I said, it goes back to that verse, the ja'al, the change, transformation for an enemy is from the external. It starts from the internal, goes to external. If you want to change our external, we have to go into the internal. And the question is, what is the internal we're changing? Is it mindset? Is it spiritual intention? Is it purification of the heart? That is a question that I think Muslims need to think about.
रिफ्लेक्शंस प्रोग्राम में शेख रिजवान सूरा फील पे रोशनी डालते हुए और इस सेगमेंट में जो चीज़ सामने आई वो ला युगय्यिरु मा बिक़ौमिन हत्ता युगय्यिरु मा बिअनफुसिहिम, जो कुरान की आयत है और ज़फ़र अली ख़ान साहब का जो एक शेर है जो इसी आयत की तशरीह है कि खुदा ने आज तक इस कौम की हालत नहीं बदली, ना हो जिसको ख़याल आप अपनी हालत के बदलने का। और ये एक नया सबक हमने सीखा सूरा फील में कि उस वक्त तक कुछ नहीं हो सकता जब तक हम खुद अपनी हालत को ना बदलें। सामीन, इस वक्त छोटा सा एड ब्रेक और दोबारा आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर होते हैं।
ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ, ऐसी खुशबू चमन के गुलों में कहाँ, जो नबी के पसीने में में मौजूद है हमने आंखों से देखा नहीं है मगर हमने आंखों से देखा नहीं है मगर उनकी तस्वीर सीने में मौजूद है जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया जिसने लाकर कलामे इलाही दिया वो मोहम्मद मदीने में मौजूद है हमने माना कि जन्नत बहुत है हंसी हमने माना कि जन्नत बहुत है हंसी छोड़ कर हम मदीना न जाए कहीं यूं तो जन्नत
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sheikh, shall we pick up from where we stopped? La yughayyiru ma bi qawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. And what we are saying has a direct link with Surah Fil in Ja'ala.
Yeah, so what I said is, if you want to really fast compress, what I was saying is the chapter Surah Fil has two transformative usages of a specific verb. Actually just came to when we were speaking. Ja'ala, which means to transform, to change. It's a special type of verb in Arabic, but it means that you change something into something else. So the chapter essentially shows, if you've been following what we've been saying, and this actually, we started this narrative before this conflict, well before it.
Yeah.
And the initial point was that the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to take reference of and to focus in on was how God did with the companions of the war elephant. And that doing was initially a psychological defeat. This doubt and lack of confidence that was placed within the mind of Abraha was the first ja'al, which is an internal change, which led to an external change. The second part is the last verse, which talks about God made them into like chewed up straw. You know, if you, and this is an agrarian metaphor, which is actually interesting because in Makkah al-Mukarramah, it's not an agrarian economy. It's not an economy or a land where you know about the growth of wheat, the growth of barley. So if you think of it, to the Meccans, it's not a directly relevant metaphor because they don't have fields. They don't have. In fact, the Quran says غير ذي زرع. It has no vegetation. So how would they imagine this? They imagine it as far away bread baskets, like Yemen was a bread basket. Northern Syria, and Syria was a type of bread basket as well, where you had agrarian economy. Madinat al-Munawwara was also that. And so it must have been a strange metaphor, but it actually ties back to the fact that Sana'a in northern Yemen was a bread basket. It created a lot of vegetation, a lot of wheat, a lot of barley. That vegetation and that place was decimated by this event. So it's it's a very subtle indication over the collapse of that as a rival to Mecca. But the point being, the change, which is internal, then leads to an external disintegration of an empire. That is, if you then say, what's the relevance to today? For a Muslim, you have to make if you see the external as being bad, you have to change the internal. You have to transform the internal to see the external change. That's why they say, like, be the change you want to see in the world. Like, be the change that you want to see in the world. And you start with yourself. And that narrative is a very difficult one because it goes against the idea of, okay, let's just purchase weaponry, let's just buy infrastructure, and then let's just do the thing we need to do. The point is, whatever you do and whatever result happens, if it's not based upon your internal being correct and the intention being correct and the purpose being godly and moral and ethical, it doesn't matter what power you have. Even Muslims had power today on the face of this earth and it was unethical and it was based on bribery and treachery, then, I wouldn't want that power, because what's the purpose of the power? Because our power was always ethical, always moral. It was always a standard, a gold standard for people to then look back on in history. And so that is, I think, the very interesting takeaway from this chapter, which is we see external things, we want to change them, they have to start internally. You cannot move that, because the Prophet said, Niyatul al-mar'u khayru min amalihi, that the person's intention is stronger than their action. Al-a'malu bin niyat, innama al-a'malu bin niyat. Numerous hadith that indicate the same thing. Actions are based upon your intention. Whatever you do in success, you could achieve something. It doesn't really make any difference unless your intention was correct. You could do a small thing with a small, pure intention, has more impact on the Day of Judgment than a massive event that you've done through which you've got notoriety and publicity and fame externally, but it'll be thrown in your face in the Day of Judgment. Like, this is just a basic Islamic narrative from the Prophet ﷺ. I don't see why it's strange. The only thing that I think Muslims, essentially do is they look out a lot. They have a lot of narrative analysis. They have a lot of political analysis. They have all of these things. I mean, there's podcast after podcast after podcast of saying, why is this person attacking this person? This is the underlying reason. This is why this happened. It's all probabilities. When I watch a political analyst, anything, you can sit from now till tomorrow and you'll have probably 30 different analysts giving 30 different viewpoints on what's happening in the world, and specifically in the conflict, with different nuances, economic, political, psychological, personality between different rulers, resources and land. And then there's people that come with the messianic idea of this is the first movements of the coming of the Mahdi. So you can sit and you can have 30 or 40. Which one's right? If you ask me which one's right, everyone has got probably a grain of truth.
A point, yeah.
So, but the point is, then, are we going to base what we do based upon the external, or are we we know the external is terrible. So do you have power over the analysis? The analysts are disagreeing. Like, there's no analyst I hear except that there's probably the best is like 40% on point, and the rest is just them building on presumptions. So basically, a 40%.
There's another
focus.
There's another point. The decimation happened. Is it because of the takabbur of one party, the haughtiness, the pride and the power, and the helplessness of the other? Or was Quraysh more equipped, and that's why it happened? There are two. If the aggression is so much, the intervention happens. So aggressor is there and the victim is there. The victim could be at any time, at any given time in history, there will be a weaker party and there will be a stronger party. So in this day and age, we know who the weaker party is and who the stronger party is. Now, where does Surah Fil comes into play? So what we're saying is, until we are prepared, nothing will happen. We will be beaten up all the time. Or not just a Muslim, I would say the entire world will remain the way it is until other parties are prepared.
Yeah, so like the situation, the story of Fil, actually, the way I've explained it, is not. I mean, if you look at it from the take a step back, you could read Abraha and his move towards the Kaaba as being the encroachment of monotheism against polytheism, and the establishment of the true religion in place of the false religion, because this is before the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. Christianity is the religion that is sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It might be slightly skewed, but it's like Ja'far, when he went to Abyssinia, he recited Surah Maryam, and the Najashi, when he drew the line, he said, there's nothing separating my religion and yours apart from this line. There was something very, very small. So why not create? Why not get rid of the idols? Because for Abraha, he could say, well, this is a idol worshipping temple, and so so from that perspective, what's the problem? What was so great about the Qurayshi society, Meccan society at the time? But the Prophet lamented it, and the burying of female children and the kind of disruption of the economic system, and it was all corrupt. What they had was courage, what they had was generosity, but the rest was all all over the place in terms of belief. So it wasn't this oppressor against the oppressed. And that's not the situation. The situation is God is preparing for the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is why, and then it's also an indication that, you can also, despite your power in this situation, Quraysh, you can still be vanquished by this person who comes, because your internal defeat will become very quickly. The internal misgivings and the doubts that you will have in your mind will lead to the victory of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's essentially what happens. You could mirror the Ababil coming to the Prophet ﷺ entering into Mekkatul Mukarramah towards the end of that period with the conquest. Do you understand? Like that.
Yeah.
For me, the metaphor is quite interesting because it is from every side. And if you were there, the Prophet told the companions to light fires all around Mekkatul Mukarramah before they entered. And you can just imagine that's Ababil. That's like you're looking at this guy and you're just seeing light upon light, which is these fires indicating a vast horde of people, which was psychological warfare. That's why the Prophet did it. So when he came in, they decided not to fight. And, it's a beautiful metaphor you could draw between the two. But the point is, the Prophet came prepared. He didn't come in saying, okay, God has promised me to conquest Mecca, and I'll just rely upon the power of God and we'll just go and let's see what happens. No, he didn't move until he was prepared.
Very delicate thing. I mean, my thick mind never gets it properly. The the link between preparation and tawakkul is just all my life. You grew up thinking, knowing from the scholars, no matter what you do, end of the day, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala decides, and. Preparation.
No, that's qada and qadar. That's basically what is written is going to happen. That God, it's basically God knows what's going to happen. That's basically what the headline is. But that doesn't affect you. You've got nothing to do with that. That's just you knowing that God knows everything. That doesn't affect how you act.
Knowing His knowledge is infinite.
Yeah, it's not going to change and shouldn't change the way you act, because you know what He wants you to do, and you go on with it. And you do it to your best your ability, and there's no complication there at all. So in the East, generally, one of the reasons that Orientalists said that Islam fell into decline was they had this sense of fatalism, which was basically, whatever God wants is going to happen. Therefore, we don't really have to try too much because what God wants will happen. Laziness. This is fatalism and laziness. And this is a scourge that I see, even if, I have respect for scholars. But using sort of feel for this kind of situation is a complete dereliction of duty. I just think it's just not healthy at all. And it's just unscholarly, and it just shows me a deep misunderstanding of the Quranic message. Because if you don't understand a simple small chapter and its purpose, and then you're asking people to basically wait for some kind of divine chastisement from the heavens when that was removed, essentially. You give me a reason why I should not say that. It just shows that they've given up. They're defeated. I mean, that's just so sad that scholars are so defeated that the go-to in those situations is to try and grasp at verses of Quran or narratives that are pre-prophetic, at the time the Prophet ﷺ was coming. When the Prophet came, he came with a different era came into being. A different era, because every prophet came with in a different era. The Prophet Isa came in the era of medicine and health, and he cured the sick, and he brought the dead to life. The Prophet Musa came at the time of magic and sorcery, and he attacked them and he challenged them on that. But, the Prophet came at a time of language and rationality and reason, and he demolished people, decimated people based upon his intelligence, the Quranic literacy, model of eloquence. And, if we turn our back on that, we've basically got nothing as a religion.
So, this thing of, Allah, I was looking at this share that again you grew up with. फजाए बद्र पैदा कर, हाँ, फजाए बद्र पैदा कर फरिश्ते तेरी नुसरत को, उतर सकते हैं कतार अंदर कतार गर्दों से आज भी. यानी
See, you see?
हाँ,
Translate it for us.
फजाए बद्र पैदा कर फरिश्ते तेरी
Ah,
नुसरत
you
को,
have to create the Fazai Badr.
उतर सकते हैं गर्दों से ऊपर से कतार अंदर कतार अब भी.
Yes. Who's that?
ये है मौलाना जफर अली खान साहब हैं.
Ah, amazing.
So
So there you go. I mean, that's it.
लेकिन
That's
फिजाए
awesome.
बदर, what is फिजाए बदर? I think the definition, the lack of definition is what is फिजाए बदर?
It's the preconditions for Badr.
Yeah.
Create the environment for Badr to take place. You sow the seeds for Badr to take place, and the angels will, even at this moment in time, come from the heavens. Because that's, I mean, nobody disagrees with that. That is absolutely true. I mean, I was speaking to somebody who'd served in Cyprus during the liberation of northern Cyprus by the Turkish army, and there's stories of some of the one of the generals was one of the awliya, and he saw one of the shuyukh coming to him in his dream, and then he basically flew in without any radar directly to the target and was successful. So there's all these instances that I absolutely believe in happening. But it was based upon that preparation was there, the preparation, the intent, the practice, the drills, all that taking place.
And how do we corroborate this? And yuriduna यानी वो जो है आयत नूरुल्लाहि बिअफ़वाहिहिम युरीदूना
युत्फिउ नूरल्लाहि बिअफ़वाहिहिम.
हाँ जी
वल्लाहु मुतिम्मु नूरिही वलौ करिहल काफिरून. Is that the verse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
ये
So
वाली आयत कैसे एक्सप्लेन करते हैं फिर हम? How will we explain this
what's the problem with that verse?
मतलब
That they want to,
all of these verses and Badr, all of this indicates to कि यार तुम्हारी हेल्प हो जाएगी, बस फिक्र ना करो.
no, wallahu mutimmu nurihi. God will never allow his fire to be extinguished. That just means the message of Islam. Like they might be successful, but God is not going to allow the message this flame to go out. Like they might have individual victories, like Abu Sufyan said, what at the end of the Battle of Uhud, the first part of it, Yawmun lana wa yawmun alayna. This is for Badr. He says, one day for us, one day for you. This is for the day of Badr. So they had minor skirmishes, minor victories, but mutimmu nurihi, God completing his light, it's absolute. That's a divine promise. You know, the loss of the battle is not the end of the war.
Okay, Jazakallah. So let's getting back to the completion of the Surah Fil, and we have about 15 minutes of this session, inshallah, about 12. So completing the Surah and kind of just touching on the connection with Surah Quraysh, which will start tomorrow, inshallah.
Yeah. So if you're following what we were doing, it's it wasn't a deep dive; it's a reflection over the Arabic. So remember, I just like when I'm doing reflections is to fixate on the Arabic on the basis of its grammatical, rhetorical force. So I don't really go into tafsir as such, like apart from the words, the meaning that comes out of the construction of the verse, the Arabic, the morphology, like tayr, tuyur, ta'ir, all these kind of things, the different meanings that is given from the Arabic is actually very powerful. So based on that, we came up with what I consider to be the purpose of the surah, the reason for the surah being revealed, and then the connection to it. So God is asking us to reflect over something that was miraculous. The miraculous nature of it was actually hidden, which was internal psychological fear placed in the mind of Abraha, which then ended up becoming a complete decimation of his army in the vicinity of the Kaaba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَجَعَلَهُمْ كَعَصْفٍ مَأْكُولٍ, and Allah made them into chewed up, crushed, battered straw. And at the end of it, ma'kul. So actually, I didn't mention this actually, lam. You notice that there's at the end of each verse, there's lam.
Mhm.
So, one of the sifat, I want to go into tajweed, but one of the sifat of this, of that's emphasized in this is the lam at the end. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. Yeah,
Allah Akbar. Alam yaj'al kaydan fi tadlil.
تضليل,
Ababil.
lam. So where's the lam coming? Like if you do the lam, look at the way it articulates at the end of each verse. And this is a chapter of the elephant. And the elephant is known as what? If you ask a child, if you're playing, I don't know if you played charades before. The kind of you kind of have to give clues about what you're saying, and you have to act it out. So if you're doing elephant, what you're doing, the trunk. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not going to do the ears. You're not going to do the tail. You're not going to do the big, thick legs. It's going to do the elephant, the trunk. And the lam is essentially indicative of that. So when the trunk of the elephant is indicative of the lam. So it's one of these kind of, it's a physiological onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is like, the word sounds like it is, but this is.
I have a document opened up on my laptop. So there are at least 20 plus words that I have to look up that used by you in English. But anyway, so this is the last one.
Okay. Anyway, sorry about that.
No problem.
Fast is getting to me. And the point being that lam will now, the reason I said that was this came out to my mind, is that will then pass on the baton to the next chapter. The lam, which is the trunk of the elephant, is done its job. Remember, the elephant comes out this really, it doesn't come out this bad. The elephant is commanded by Abraha. And end of the day, it stops. It doesn't do what it's told to do. So in a sense, it's from one respect, it is obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It responded to God's command of not moving. So that elephant's trunk is basically transferring this chapter to the next chapter, which is going to say all this supernatural, unbelievable event that took place is going to be مأكول لإيلاف قريش. لإيلاف قريش. So this that's happened is a preparation for the Quraysh, and specifically for somebody in the Quraysh. And remember, this is all I said. This chapter is a preparation for the coming of the Prophet ﷺ, and the safety of the Quraysh and the security of the Quraysh and the beneficent nature of the Quraysh is prepared also for a specific purpose, which is the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. And so both of these are utilized to provide an introduction of the Prophet ﷺ into the hall of prophets, so that he walks as the most praised of prophets ﷺ.
So Surah Fil, Sheikh, is this statement a good one to go by, that the unseen world is bigger than the seen world? Right? And most things happen in unseen world. And we are just actors acting out to sometimes occasionally find out what's in the unseen world. So the elephant stopping is from the angelic realm. It didn't, no one knows the cause of it. Abraha didn't know it. It just stopped. So point is, our psychology always looks for some kind of
Cause and effect.
Intervention as well. Cause and effect. And we are looking for intervention. We're looking for, we do things, but we still want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make them happen through intervention, even in our small things in our daily life. Is this not the right concept to go by?
So cause and effect is cause and effect. You have a headache, take paracetamol. There's the medicine, interventions, all these things, planning, absolutely. But then there's the aspect of dua, which is seeking divine intervention. So you can make you can ask for a divine intervention for protection. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. The Prophet's famous dua. I seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the evil that He's created, is a request for protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from things that exist in the world. Yeah. So there's a type of dua in that. So Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wala fis sama' wa huwa as-sami'ul alim. Another dua from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with whose name nothing harms in the heavens and the earth, and He's the hearing and the seeing. So that is, and the most knowledgeable. That again is a type of protection from the unseen you're seeking. But what you're seeking is protection from the effects of that. So something might happen to you and you might not like it, and it might be difficult to take. It's not that you're asking for God to remove it. It's you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you from the evil that comes from it, or the harm that comes from it, or give you patience in dealing with it. It's the difference between, a person, afflicted with an illness and saying, "Oh Allah, I need to get rid of this in the next 24 hours. Can you just do it, please?" From a person, "Oh Allah, I've been afflicted by this, and if it's meant to be, then allow me to bear with it with patience. And if it's meant not to be like that, then guide me to the best path of healing and intervention." So in both situations, you're just wanting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you in dealing with the situation that you cannot get out of. Is dealing. So there's a completely different mindset, and it's an amazing mindset, because if you think of people in Gaza when they were under this, and still are under this intense, tortural genocide, it was that thing that they knew the situation they're in. It wasn't going to be removed, but they asked God for patience within it, and shadad and as-sabr in that situation, which is why their minds were so strong, their hearts were so strong, their spirits were so strong. And so that's a game changer, that mindset. What is not a game changer is keeping on asking God for specific worldly things, and then saying, "Oh, I asked and God didn't give. I asked and God didn't give. I asked, it didn't happen." But that's not how the world works. That's not how God works, because the process of pain, suffering, setbacks is a process of learning, like a child learning through life. They have to go through difficulties. You can't help them with everything. They have to make sense of how to navigate the world. It's at that point they get to maturity, and then they look back on their life and think, okay, those difficult times, those boring times of education, those boring times of tests and learning is now beneficial, because I know what the purpose of it all is. So if you try and explain to a child why they're learning mathematics, it doesn't make any sense. It's just numbers. Well, that's why you have trillion-dollar companies in existence, because they used mathematics. They basically instrumentalized mathematics that, they saw the purpose of. You don't. If you're intellectually wise enough and mature enough, you realize that's the case. Same thing with dua. Same thing with iltija. In Ramadan, where everybody is focused in on that, but then you have to focus in on the purpose of it as well, which is you cannot get through this without the help of Allah. You're asking Allah to give you the sabr and the patience and the thankfulness to do justice to the fact that you exist. Just that in and of itself, to just change your focus, change your viewpoint, change your perspective in life, always makes a massive difference. I was using that example, a person driving down a coastal road, beautiful scenery on the left, and then they've got mountains or just concrete on the right. You can decide to look left or right. God has put you on the path. You're on the road, you're driving. You can decide to look to the beautiful, or you can decide to look to the nondescript and the boring. That's our choice. So God is not fixing us in that.
That's all the time we have for reflections today. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, for another insightful session with us. Tomorrow we will start Surah Quraysh, inshallah. Up until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
میں سب ہے مدینہ نہیں، یوں تو جنت میں سب ہے مدینہ نہیں، اور جنت مدینے میں موجود ہے، ہم نے آنکھوں سے دیکھا نہیں ہے مگر، ہم نے آنکھوں سے دیکھا نہیں ہے مگر، ان کی تصویر سینے میں موجود ہے، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، جس نے لا کر کلام الہی دیا، وہ محمد مدینے میں موجود ہے، میں موجود ہے۔ چھوڑنا تیرا طیبہ گوارا نہیں، چھوڑنا تیرا طیبہ گوارا نہیں، ساری عالم میں ایسا نظارہ نہیں، ایسا منظر زمانے میں دیکھا نہیں، ایسا منظر زمانے میں دیکھا نہیں، جیسا منظر مدینے